I want to cover off something that I was talking about for contractors, and I'm still undecided whether to put this in PPJWT. It might be outside the scope. But then again, because I'm still in 2020 and as I record this, I feel this is in scope. So I'm going to leave it here. So I'm going to continue with job security and contractors to give you a little bit of an update. Okay, so maybe I didn't quite explain things. So let's have a off payroll worker rules. So this is tax law pending the 5th of April 2021, and where the client, if you're lucky enough to define one, determines if you who's providing the service, a contractor, is deemed as an employee or not. Happy days if they are not going to deem you an employee. Problem is, the big companies and the very large big companies do not want to take the risk. And the reason is because if they get this determination wrong, it's called a status and determination report, the revenue will inefficiently take a long time to come back. And of course, with penalties and interest, it could ruin a business. If in fact, that person that they hired as a contractor should have been an employee from the get-go. So nobody wants a investigation 3 or 4 or even 5 years. I think the limit is up to 6 years. And goodness knows with the such things such as the loan charge, where retrospective taxation law. Anyway, I'm getting beyond my station here. So if you're not operating as an employer and the client definitely, and you have this in writing, then nothing changes. Phew, indeed. So what it means is for a business, a contractor still there's no responsibility for pension contribution, no student loan, holidays, social security, sick pay. For all intents and purposes, there's just a bona fide contractor. The only thing with no employment rights is that they're now on the payroll. That means national insurance and apprenticeship levy are deducted at source. That comes to about 14.3%. So it's a tax grab by HMRC, the Treasury. That's all it is. And they're bringing these rules in potentially in April 2021. And I know the disdain and the frustration in the middle of COVID now, when, say, hospitality is on the ropes and yeah. Okay, let's move on. So let's go back to a bit of case law for contractors. So if you have this book, this is already Contractor's Handbook by a certain Dave Chaplin. Thank you, Dave. I got mine years ago and I wrapped it in shrink wrap. I still use it. So I remembered reading this. So ready-made mixed concrete in 1968. In the 60s, it refers to a case law against the Minister of Pensions and National Insurance, which we would now call the HMRC. And the judge in that case, McKenna J., established that the RMC were working as a contract, not as an employee. So that is contract for services, not of services. So if you know what I'm talking about, it's still important today, this bit of case law for IR35, and their 3 conditions, the 3 pillars are control, right of substitution, and mutuality of obligation. So let me drill down. These are known as the irreducible minimums for employment versus contracting. So you're not an employee if you can show the mechanism of instruction, which is control. You decide what, how, and when work is provided. And more importantly, since we're all remote working and could accept remote work anywhere on this planet now, where work is completed. So that hint is a barrier which we could enforce. So I'm getting beyond myself. Substitution theory, where substitution, think of getting your bathroom or your kitchen installed. What do? You go to bath store or you go to Wren Kitchens. These are other great suppliers of bathrooms and kitchens available out there in the UK. Well, if you want your kitchen installed, then you buy kitchen from Wren, and then they would recommend that you could go with one of their recommended kitchen installers, or you can find a builder, and they all tend to be called Builder John. No offense, really. So the idea, can a worker or service provider send a substitute? Now, if John, the kitchen installer, becomes sick, then he can't install your kitchen in, say, the summer months, or God forbid, the winter months. Can John get another builder friend of his, also called John or Ian or Mary, to install your kitchen? Can they do that? And it's usually at the workers or the contractors' expense. So as the client, and suppose you are getting your kitchen installed, you can accept or not the substitute, which brings me to determination of mutuality of obligation. So this simply means, is the client obliged to find the contractor work? Or is the contractor obliged to accept the offer of work? So think about this. If you have all three of these, then you have a contract for services, not employment, because an employee is told what, how, and when work they have to do, and now, and maybe not, where work is completed during COVID. They cannot substitute another employee, and to accept employment in order to get a fair day's wage, then the employee has to work at the employer's behest. So that is the obligation here. Have you got that now? Control, substitution, mutuality of obligation. Okay, let me jump into small company exemption. Now, in the up and coming off payroll rules, worker rules, in 2021, 5th of April, remember, a small company must satisfy 2 of 3 conditions for 2 consecutive tax years. I think this came from lobbying from the Confederation of British Industries and other lobby groups and the revenue said yes, they're going to apply this exemption. And it's slightly confusion that it has to satisfy for 2 consecutive years. But there you go. The criteria is that the small company must have an annual turnover of less than £10.5 million, an employee headcount of less than or equal to 50 people, and a balance sheet total of less than 5.25 million. Just think of it as 5 million. Now, you'll be all right if you're a brilliant startup, if you are in the first couple of years going to be on a startup or a turnover of 10 million, because I guess we all would like to work for you. But this is a great opportunity for small companies, because contractors know that outside IR35 is possible if they can find a small company exemption. So if you want to hire a contractor for 2021, 22, 23 and 24, now is the time to stick the fishing rod out into the lake and grab some of the best talent that there is. Need I say more? Let's go. A little reminder of what we're talking about here. In the old world, before off payroll worker rules, a worker would have a personal services company, in red a limited company, employee of just one, who was the director, may have a spouse as a second in kind of employee or treasurer, and they provide a service to the client, and the PSC, the limited company, would invoice the client. The client would pay by services plus VAT, and the VAT would go to the tax man, lady, and the personal services would pay the worker, which is the contractor, a dividend and a small salary. What has changed with off payroll is now that facility is disappearing come April 2021, and where tax is happening at source, hence pay as you earn. That means national insurance plus the apprentice level, which equals a total of 14.3%, which begs the question, what's the point of having a personal services or limited company in the UK afterwards? You may as well not bother with it. You got that? So let me jump into a calculation example. So to cover this over, since we're short on time, unless you have an alternative income, what is the point of a personal service company? So if you are influencer or video person or doing fashion or something else, or in a movie business, is a very important lobby. I think also horse racing, then you probably can keep that limited company open. You can, we're in the coming world, if no point in claiming a dividend because you'll be double taxed, and then you're paying yourself a salary, you're going to be double taxing yourself with national insurance again, and you've lost the ability to claim business expenses and travel expenses. So I'm just going to jump into the Google Docs right now to give this example. So in this spreadsheet, which I'm going to share with PPJWT, which I've called Off Payroll Tax Calculation Example 2020. Don't worry, this is probably still relevant to you when we get the tax law changed. So in this example here, considering we have a contractor who's on a daily rate of £500 per day, and they work for 20 days and they commute one day to the office in London for 6 months. They say you're commuting from Milton Keynes, where I live, and for 6 months you've got a rolling contract. It could extend. In the 2019 world, your rendered services is 10,000. You might have travel expense, and I've drilled down into the travel expense here. Where you are commuting one time a week, so that would be a rail card of 35 quid, 36 quid. You've got your Oyster card and you have to park at the station. I think that probably has jumped up to 9 quid. So if you haven't got, if you go to the station, the car park right near the station, that's going to cost you 9 quid. But in any case, for your month of whatever month of the year it is, you've got a travel expense of £198.80, and you suppose the company that you work for has material ID that you have to expense yourself, and you've got some material other, and you may have a green allowance for work. I've put that in there as 150 quid. So in total, your outgoing, your charge to the client is going to be plus VAT £13,000 and 76 pence and 16 pence. When this is subject to PAYE, your gross amount is this. So a contractor is probably going to go spare because they've lost out on the travel expense and the material expense. They get back the green allowance, And remember that £10,150 is going to be gross. So the net is going to be about 35% of that figure, which is going to be 7,000 something. Okay, so that is the 1 day a week commute. And this is the example that I would give myself, even if I was considering a contract in London. This is the real figure, and then taken off the off payroll. Now, in the 2019 world, in a world where we had to commute into London, this is just the illustration, where we were commuting 5 days a week into the office. That meant we got a national rail card of £64 because we're covering 20 days here. I think that was the cost, and then I've multiplied the Oyster card by 20, so you're spending time on the underground to get to the office, and excluding any lunch times or going to the pub in the evening, which you could include, and I'd bump up the cost of the car parking. So you've got a travel expense of £925 a month on your journey, which you would put onto the limited company account. And it doesn't matter if the client is paying or your personal service company is paying. That is considerable expense. That is over the course of a year. If this contract extended to a year, that's £12,000 there. And you may have material expense of 1 month or material other. Suppose you were getting a laptop. You had to buy a laptop. Say you wanted one of these Apple MacBook Pros M1 processors for one particular month that you wanted to claim. Well, therefore you would get in total would be £17,000 there. So I'll take off the gorgeous laptop. But as you can see, it comes to £13,950.60. And when you take away the ability to claim expenses, it really does become less lucrative contracting. Even for me, commuting from Milton Keynes, or there are people who commute even further from Birmingham into London. And that's a 2-hour journey time. So let's get real here. I've met someone at the DevOps London Exchange a while ago, and they had a contract where they were living and working away from home, commuting from Edinburgh to London. I believe they were flying, not taking the train, to save time. And they were using EasyJet. So I've gone for the unit price of £119 for that weekend travel. So traveling up on, say, Thursday and or Friday night, and then traveling down on Sunday. And then if you're lucky enough to work from home, you can adjust some of these things here. So I've said Sunday to Friday here, and you check out on Friday, fly up and do your work at home in the afternoon or whenever you need. So you can see the monthly cost. This is for a weekly cost. So I've let me recharge my brain. So this is 1 week's cost. So you've got your flight, you've got your hotel in London from Sunday to Friday, and you've got your taxis, which you might probably need, and I guess you need this twice actually. So that's 728. So and you've still got your Oyster cards here because you're traveling from the hotel to the client. So the grand total of your travel expense, if you multiply that by 4 for a month, is £2,912. So for a given month, and I'll leave all the material IT and the material other the same, you have a gross payable if it was just those things to a client of £16,000. Now, if you lose the because you're flying by plane and there are no such things as electric planes, you may still get a green allowance there because you're using the Oyster card and taxi services. So you have a shortfall here, because you're spending, if you were to do this, and I don't think anyone sane enough would spend £2,000 a month, £3,000 a month on travel, flying from Edinburgh to London and burning up that lucrative income, which this is now PAYE, so you're not going to see a lot of that. You might see for £500 a day, if that was gross, you probably could see £6,000, probably £550, and all of that is being burnt up by the travel expense, and nobody in the right mind would do this. So I think it's ludicrous why anyone would do off payroll worker rule and commute from Edinburgh to London, given the next year's contract. Okay, so let me switch back to the slides now, and this will be part of PPJWT. I've decided this. So I've given the calculation example, so to answer certain people's questions here, where the typical approach is that we have a very large business and they would engage contractors through personal services company, umbrella company, and they, in the old world, you could work directly for the personal service company, be statement for service, and there'd be lots of contractors, in which I've grayed out. So there'd be a multitude of contractors working for a personal service. It may be 100, maybe a lot. But there is an opportunity. Remember the small company exemption here. As long as the turnover is less than 10.5 million and the balance sheet is less than 5, and you have less than 50 employees, 2 out of 3, what that means is that you could engage a separate small business who specialize in this service. So there is a kind of an opportunity for small businesses here, and they have an advantage because they can still work freely with statement of work, contract for services, and the shift of responsibility, as long as they are not employee agents, so they have a unique advantage here, as long as they don't break those, or at least they come under the 2 of the 3 criteria for small business exemption. That's an opportunity. So actually, I think this idea of the small company exemption is great, because the responsibility goes to the small business, and they are exempt until 2024, 2025, how long this Tory Conservative government lasts in office, really. And they have the wherewithal, as long as they hold to 50 employees and don't have a turnover greater than £10.5 million for 2 consecutive tax years, they'll be fine. They can employ people or hire people rather as outside IR35 contractors, and they can do that without any issues at all. There is an alternative which I speculating in my head. I don't know for a fact. I'm not a tax specialist or an employment specialist, but given that mixed ready-made concrete case, and we all work as contractors, not directly, indirectly, usually consultancies and employee agencies. What if we were to emphasize contract for services for substitution and mutuality of obligation? If we could self-certify a substitute that we know or we have checked, so another contractor who specializes in Java or Java EE or Spring Boot, or it could be a Ruby and Ruby on Rails, it could be a Kotlin Android developer, if we as a professional body could get that written into a contract for services, that I, as Bob the Builder or Peter the Java full stack engineer, designer, architect, whatever, could get someone else to cover for me if I was unwell and I couldn't do the job or something happened, that is a strong indicator. And bear in mind, although I haven't shown it, there is a tool out there called the Self-Certification Strategy Tool, or CEST, and it's very weak in mu and substitution, and this is a tool provided by HMRC to establish, are you inside or outside IR35. And if it is the case, we could get some of the contracts amended so we can self-certify professional skill, or we got together collaboratively. And bear in mind, we don't have to be in the office, do we? We all in 2020 have all been working from home in lockdown. So do we need to be sitting in the office? Doesn't this strengthen our case for substitution? Now we all work with Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Google Hangouts or the equivalent thing, or using Slack. The only thing that stops people going from one company to the other is a friggin' laptop and procurement and provisioning rules that say, is this person using this laptop, or they're using the same internet, broadband, whatever. So maybe there's a way that we can get I would say the desirability. I love the bathroom and kitchen fitters who even subcontract. If we could do this for personal services companies and get another contractor to substitute in for our contractors, and maybe that contractor would substitute me in, we could be enjoying a hit on this off-payroll worker rules. So ideas and feedback on a postage stamp, on a postcard, I will include it. I've decided I'm going to include it in the PPJWT course. I'm also going to make this video and recording free to the world because I think it's relevant. And I'll see you at the next lecture. Next slide, please.